Hello and welcome to a Intercede MyID Virtual Espresso video. These videos are designed to put over a concept of MyID within a few minutes, within enough time it takes to drink a rather nice cup of coffee. And today we're going to be talking about additional identities within MyID, which is actually quite a useful function. So this is covered in the MyID administration guide. Always makes sense to look at that. We're currently on version 12.2 at the time of recording, but that may have changed. And it's in section 24, and this goes into great details about some of the things that I'll be talking about today. Okay, so what is an additional identity and when is it needed? Well, let's have a look. Here is one scenario. So we have Sam Smith. He works for the IT department within an organization, and he has an account within the user's organizational unit. Sam uses that account for his everyday functionality, logging in, email, etc. But Sam is also a security guy, a high administrator for some additional services. And so he actually has an administrative account which has higher levels of privileges within these applications. You don't want Sam using that administrator account all the time. You only want him to use it when he needs to. So you would set up two accounts potentially there, each with certificates for authentication. In what you want to avoid though is actually Sam having two smart cards or two USB devices, because A, that's annoying for Sam. It's also more costly. So what we can do is we can put Sam Smith's credentials onto his USB device or virtual smart card or smart card as standard, but we can also include additional identity credentials, hence the name, that goes on there, which he can use occasionally when he needs to actually have access to specific systems. Another example of this use would be, for example, Bob Jones. Bob works at head office for a company which has several sub-companies. Each sub-company has their own directory. Bob has accounts within these different directories, but again, you don't want Bob to have three different smart cards or three different USB devices. So here we can put those additional identities onto Bob's account, so we can go into the different organizations and authenticate. Okay, so as in explained within the administrative guide, section 24, one of the things you need to do to get this thing set up is actually set up the additional certificate templates within the certificate authority itself. Here isn't, for example, as a screenshot from the Microsoft CA. We also have a Virtual Espresso video around that. And the main difference between this and a standard authentication certificate is that we are not taking the user information, the subject name, from the Active Directory. What we're actually doing is supplying it within the request, because what we'll do is under Bob's primary account, we will request his additional identities. So that template needs to be set up. Within MyID itself, we then need to get those certificates working with it there. And what we do is we allow identity mapping on a certificate policy. And then we select that as part of the credential profile. So let's have a look at that in action. So here, if we look at a certificate authority, there's a couple on this system, but let's look at the Microsoft one and edit it. We can see down here we have smart card additional identities. So this is the template that's on the CA that we just set up, that just showed you earlier. And the one thing we're doing here is we're having that allow identity mapping, and that's specifying this is for an authentication's an additional identity credential. And what you've seen there is additional attributes as well we can specify on these certificate templates. And this is saying that as part of the certificate request, we want this particular information to be sent across as well. So that's the identity mapping section. So here we're saying the user principal name is going to be dynamic, and it's going to be selected from the user principal name that MyID has, and the email address again is dynamic, and again that's going to be from MyID. But MyID is clever enough when we put those requests in to say, this is going to be for an additional identity. We will send through the details for the additional identity of this user. Okay. And there we go. So we've set up the certificate on the CA, we've set the certificate up within MyID itself. On a credential profile, we do have other virtual expressos that explain how credential profiles work, but this is where we map those certificate templates to the device that's going to be issued. That certificate template, because we've said it's going to be an additional identity one, won't be available for general selection into a certificate template. But any certificate templates, any credential profiles that you want to have those certificate templates added to, what you need to do is just tick that issue additional identities section on the credential profile. And that will tell MyID, okay, we want any additional identity credentials to be added that's associated with the user. Okay. So here we're going to look at how we actually associate the certificate template with the additional identity with the user account. So under the People section, we have a Manage Additional Identities workflow. And here you select the name of the account that you want to have as the primary account. So here we're going to have Fred Argent, and there he is. And you'll see there's a tab there for additional identities. And this is the point where we specify what additional identities within the LDAP we're going to be using, or within the MyID database that we're going to be using for Fred. His name's not Dred, his name is Fred. So I'll just type Dreaded again. So that's my fondness for 2000 AD. But here we're doing a search of the LDAP, and this is the area of the LDAP that you have rights to. So it has to be within this administrative account scope. And then we found a admin account for Fred, the one we want. We're going to add that in. And here, I'll just pause it a second, you can see there is a certificate policy associated now for Fred and his additional identity. If there were multiple certificate policies there that could be linked in, you would have options to do that. And again, if there were multiple CAs with those different policies in and templates in, you can select those. But here there's just one, so we can that has effectively said that Fred Argent's main account has been linked to his admin account, and those are the certificate templates that we want to issue to Fred. So that's great. So if we issued a device based on a credential profile that has that link in, it would also add in those certificates for his additional identities. You can remove them, so you can remove this link just as easily as you saw us set it up there. If you click remove, it will drop that out. Any additional identity credentials that have been previously issued to this account will then be revoked to the CA. So it will be we will cancel any previously issued certificates. So there you go. That's nice and easy. That shows you that it's a really good useful bit of functionality within MyID. Makes life a lot simpler for the end users. They don't have to carry multiple cards around, and the operators don't have to manage those cards. Couple of limitations, couple of things to think about when doing it. If they have multiple additional identities, well, be careful, because you're putting certificates onto a device. That device has to have space for those certificates to make sure there's some capacity there. Possible restrictions due to PIV cards and their container limitations. So some PIV devices and applets don't support these additional identities due to the fixed purposes of the containers within that device. However, just look at which devices they are, that they're specified within the Smart Card Integration Guide. MyID can support additional identities, for example, within YubiKey devices in conjunction with the YubiKey mini driver. So we have some functionality there. It's just a flag if you have a very tied down PIV based device. And secondary, you can't renew certificates that have been issued for additional identities. So make sure those templates aren't set up for automatic renewal. And that's it. As I say, keep an eye on the admin guide if you're implementing this. But it's a very useful piece of functionality, and it's a great time saver for the end user and for the administrator. So thanks a lot. My coffee's still hot. I hope that was useful to you. Any questions, please let us know. and all the best. Thank you very much.